Shortly after the end of the Second World War, a quiet Midwestern backyard sits peacefully bathed in bright sunlight. A storm the night before has snapped a slender apple tree near the house. This tree was planted as a living memorial for Larry, a son reported missing in action 3 years ago. Gathered in this yard are the surviving Kellers. Joe, a successful manufacturer who worked his way up from the shop floor. His wife Kate holds absolute faith. Her missing son is alive, and Chris, a veteran coming home to work in his father's business. Chris has an immediate goal this Sunday morning. He's invited a woman named Ann Deaver to stay at the house so he can ask her to marry him. Ann was Larry's girlfriend before he disappeared. To accept Ann is to accept that Larry is never coming back. The Kellers' comfortable post-war life is completely dependent on avoiding this exact conversation. They maintain a fragile peace by stepping around Kate's ironclad refusal to believe her son is dead. Ann's arrival threatens the delicate balance of the household. She is the daughter of Steve Deaver, Joe Keller's former next-door neighbor and his wartime business partner. During the war, the Keller-Deaver machine shop manufactured parts for military aircraft. Under immense pressure to meet production quotas, their factory knowingly shipped out 120 cracked cylinder heads for P-40 fighter planes. This diagram visualizes the direct human consequence of that shipment. Those defective parts were installed in active aircraft, causing 21 pilots to crash and die in battle. The military traced the faulty parts back to the shop. In the ensuing trial, Steve Deaver was convicted and sent to prison, while Joe Keller appealed his own conviction and was completely exonerated. Joe walked free because of a highly specific alibi. He testified he was sick in bed with the flu on the exact day the cracked heads were discovered. According to the court record, that left Steve alone in the factory to make the fatal decision over the telephone. Ann hasn't spoken to her father since he was incarcerated. But by bringing her back into the Keller household as a prospective wife, Chris is inadvertently dragging the 21 dead pilots and the unresolved guilt of the factory right back into his parents' backyard. The quiet Sunday shatters when Ann's brother, George Deaver, suddenly turns up at the Keller home. George has taken an early morning flight straight from visiting his father, Steve, in the penitentiary. George delivers an immediate demand to his sister. He insists that Ann pack her bags and leave the Keller property with him at once. For the first time, George recounts Steve's version of the fateful day at the plant. Steve claims the foreman found the defects and called Joe. Over the phone, Joe explicitly ordered Steve to weld over the cracks and ship the parts, promising to take full responsibility. When the military investigated, Joe claimed the flu and denied the phone call ever happened. George's arrival forces the unspoken history out into the open air. The younger generation, Chris, Ann, and George, can no longer rely on the court's verdict. They have to actively choose between loyalty to the fathers who raised them and the objective truth of what happened on the factory floor. The Kellers attempt to diffuse the situation with hospitality, but in the middle of a nostalgic conversation, Kate Keller makes a critical mistake. Trying to emphasize her husband's robust nature, Kate casually states that Joe hasn't been sick a single day in 15 years. George immediately seizes on the contradiction. If Joe Keller hasn't been sick in 15 years, then his sudden flu on the day the parts shipped is a total fabrication. George is forced out of the yard, but the damage is done. Left alone with his father, Chris presses the issue, escalating into a violent physical confrontation where he demands an explanation. Cornered by his own son, Joe finally confesses. He admits he knew the cylinder heads were defective, but he authorized the shipment anyway. He was terrified that if he reported 120 ruined parts, the military would tear up his contract and destroy the business he had spent a lifetime building. Joe offers his ultimate justification. He argues that the harsh realities of wartime manufacturing forced his hand, and he committed the crime solely so the business would survive to be passed down to Chris. This confession completely shatters Chris. He realizes that the bank accounts, the new car, the new refrigerator, and his comfortable suburban existence were purchased by his father, trading the lives of 21 soldiers for financial security. It is 2 o'clock the following morning. Chris returns to the house after driving around in a state of shock. He tells his mother he is leaving town for good. He is disgusted by his own inaction. Realizing he lacks the practical ruthlessness to send his own father to a prison cell. Facing the loss of her remaining son, Kate delivers a desperate ultimatum to her husband. She insists that if Chris leaves, Joe must turn himself in to the authorities. For Joe Keller, the family unit is the only justification for his existence. Without Chris, his crimes have no meaning. The Keller family reaches a complete standstill. They are entirely paralyzed by the past, unable to move forward together, yet emotionally incapable of seeking conventional legal justice against their patriarch. Anne breaks the stalemate, revealing a letter kept hidden for 3 years, written by Larry the day he died. In it, Larry explains he had read the military news reports detailing his father's arrest and the shipment of defective aircraft engines. Consumed by the unbearable shame of his father's actions, Larry writes that he can no longer face the world. He states his intention to go out on a mission and intentionally crash his own plane. Joe reads the letter in stunned silence. The abstract numbers of 21 dead strangers suddenly crystallize into the direct violent loss of his own flesh and blood. He finally grasps the true scope of his actions outside the boundaries of his own property line. Standing in the dark yard, Joe speaks his final pivotal realization regarding the men who died in those P-40 fighters. I think to him, he says, they were all my sons, and I guess they were. Utterly defeated, Joe excuses himself, quietly stepping back into the house. Moments later, a single gunshot rings out from inside. The tragedy closes on a brutal mechanical irony. Joe Keller's ruthless pursuit of preserving family wealth is the precise mechanism that drove one son to suicide and shattered the life of the other.